I want to show you some more advanced compositing techniques in Photoshop, and this is how you can bring a whole bunch of different images together to create one that's more than the sum of its parts. This is the file that we're going to be making, and this is a simple book cover to a fake little mystery novel, murder mystery. So let me take you on a tour of this real quickly. And here in my layers panel, I've got two main folder groups. The first one is all of the title and text information, and this is pretty simple. There's just some text. But there is this feather layer, and I've got the file available for this and it's saved as a smart object. And if you double click on this, you're going to see that it is a feather. But if I turn off the mask, you'll see that it's actually got a whole background to it. Now, I want to save this. If you haven't used smart objects before, they are a great way to keep your resolution while making things very, very editable. And I will explain that in a little bit. The next area is going to be the wing itself. And you can see the different layers I've got here. I've got a blood splatter layer, which is just the red that's across it. And it is also a smart object, so I can go into it and see what it is. And I have these files available. The wing is also part of a larger image, or this one. And I'll show you how we can grab this file out of off of another one. And then the drip is really, there's hardly anything to it. We don't really do anything but change some blending modes. And yeah, these drips are all the exact same file, just duplicated. And they're set to, oops, the last one's supposed to be set to darken, but it's okay. The wing is, the blood splatter is set to color burn. It would normally look like this, but when we set it to color burn, the color portions of it get burned into the layer below it, so that's kind of cool. The feather, I believe, also has a few layer effects, a little drop shadow on it, and so does the wing itself. Okay, so this seems fairly simple. You can tell all the different parts. So let's make one. First off, just so we know the size of it, it's 5 by 7 at 300, and that will translate in pixels to 1500 pixels wide by 2100 pixels across. So if we're going to make ours, we're going to go File, New, in inches. I want this one to be 5 across, 7, 300. And the question is always RGB or CMYK. Since this is print, we should do CMYK, but what I often find works a lot easier is if you start it in RGB and then do the conversion at last into CMYK. This way, if you're working on your web files, you retain that high quality color, and then you make your lower quality color prints later. And also, RGB is slightly less processor intensive than RGB because there is one less color that the computer has to manage. Okay, so here's my new file. I'll save this on my desktop. I've got a book images folder. I'll call it book cover or something like that. And we can do the typography first. So I'm going to grab my type tool, and this is Murder. And the font is okay, but I think I'm looking for something that says murder. I'm going to go with the Adobe Garamond, which is a pretty standard font. I'm going to make it black and make it a little bit larger. In fact, it should probably take up most of the image. Murder. Okay. So I've got my text layer, and in case you have never done that, you can Control-T a text layer, and it will transform it. I'll do my next layer. That was an Alt drag. So right now I'm holding down the Alt key, and you can see that my arrows double, and then if I hold down Shift, it keeps it in line. So I've got my murder copy, and it's murder most. This text is really large. This should be tiny compared to the other text. You know, that purple line is trying to make it line up. Alright, I'm going to rearrange some of these so murder's on top. If you would like, you can duplicate a layer this way by dragging it down to the new layer button. So my murder copy is actually going to be murder most foul, but I'm going to replace the L with that feather. If you'd like to do some more fine adjustments with your text, this button right here, when you have text selected, will bring up your text, your character and paragraph options. One of the ones I want to try and play around with is the, it's called tracking. It's the spacing in between letters. There we go. The F-O-U-L to be a little bit larger, but also spread out a bit. And now my feather should fit in here. I'm going to need to shrink it down just a little bit. Now, this says they're lined up. Can you see that purple line on the left? But they're not. If you look, I'll pull in a guide. There we go. They're not quite lined up. The reason tends to be that, especially when I adjust the tracking, the block that makes up the text of one text box does not necessarily match up with the block of another. Yeah, so they kind of are different sizes. The computer's not matching them up properly. There we go. I think now they kind of match up. Murder most foul. Alright. So let's bring in our feather layer. And there's a bunch of different ways to do this. I think probably one of the easier ones is going to be to simply open the file. And it will simply be a new tab in Photoshop. Then we can do some basic editing and then bring it over. So I'm going to crop this. I got the wrong crop tool. There we go. Just need it right around the feather, nothing else. Okay. There, I have a beautiful feather. And if you'd like to get this file into the other document, I've seen a couple ways to do this. This apparently no longer works on PCs. Just being able to drag it. Oh, okay, there we go. If you want to see that again. You can take a layer. You used to be able to, I think you used to be able to click right here from the layers panel and drag it, but I have to grab the move tool, have the layer selected. I can pull that layer, click and drag it up to another tab, and then when I bring it down and let go, it pops it onto the page. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to call this one Feather, and I'm going to save it at this point. And now I'm going to show you the benefit of smart objects. The real benefit is when this happens, is to compensate for this. When you transform a non-smart object layer, just a regular raster layer of any kind, you can squeeze it down to really, really tiny, like this, and hit enter. And then, if you try to transform it again and bring it back up to size, it looks awful, because during that shrinking, Photoshop threw out all of those tons and tons of pixels. The vast majority of those pixels are just gone. And then it tried to blow it back up. Well, those pixels are gone, so Photoshop has to literally make it up. That's why it looks all pixelated and fuzzy. Let me go back a few steps. There we go. If you make this a smart object, usually it requires right-clicking on the name. There's an option called Convert to Smart Object. What it does is it just retains the entire image in its own separate layer. So now when I transform it down and then bring it back, all of that quality it remains in the file. Now the thing is, you're not actually allowed to do stuff with smart objects. They exist as files unto themselves within this file. Let me show you what I mean. If you double click on the thumbnail of any smart object, I think I just accidentally undid that. Convert to smart object. There we go. This is the little icon you get, a couple little boxes and pages in the lower right hand corner of the thumbnail. When you double click on the thumbnail, it opens that file up in a .psb file. And this is, you're just editing that layer by itself. And now we can start to make all the edits that we want to this one. What I'd like to do is add a layer mask so that I can get rid of everything around it. Now, if you're not used to the Adobe way of doing things, there is the bad way, which is the eraser tool. And the eraser tool, if you use Microsoft Paint, then you probably know it destroys stuff. And, you can, oh no, I deleted too much. The problem now is that I can't get any of this info back unless I undo. If I come back tomorrow after I've saved and shut down the computer, that info's gone forever. So what I need is a better way of editing this. And this is done through something called a layer mask. This is also called non-destructive editing. And what I can do is use the magic wand tool, the W key, and it may give you the quick selection tool, which is just as good. Yeah, this one is working pretty well. What this one does is it adds to a major selection. Let me deselect it. When you click once, you grab a couple of pixels. When you click again, it adds the next sampled color to that selection. And now it's going to grab this white, and it's pretty good about detecting the edges of things. It's not great, and it will do weird things on occasion. But as I'm clicking around, I'm adding to the selection, and if you do something like that, you can hold down Alt, and that will take away from the selection. This is Alt, it becomes a minus symbol. When you let go of Alt, it becomes a little plus symbol. Okay, so now I've got a nice, pretty little selection. Actually, let me see if I can get rid of this. Let me zoom in. Let me shrink this down a bit. Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. I can live with that. So I was talking earlier about layer masks. And I honestly think that the layer mask is the division between amateurs and professionals in Photoshop. Once you learn layer masks and you start incorporating them into every project, you are on your way to being a professional. It's kind of the starting line, the real starting line. This is a layer mask. It is the little square with the circle in the middle of it. And when you click on it, you will gain this little layer and sub-layer attached to your existing layer, and you can see that it erases everything. Now, it didn't do it perfect. But what's going on here is that this is a black and white layer. Wherever, and I can, there we go. This is what it actually looks like. And what the computer does is it just takes whatever's black and represents that as transparent on the underlying layer. And whatever's white is the stuff that you can see through. So think of this as your invisible ink layer. You can literally take a brush, and as long as the only colors you have are black and white, when you're dealing with these layers, these layer masks, it's the only colors you can deal with. Wherever you paint in white, it comes back. Wherever you paint in black, it goes away. Oh, that's kind of cool. Now the nice thing is that if you hold down Shift and click on the layer mask, it disables it temporarily. All the info is there, and it hasn't gone anywhere. So if you accidentally take out too much, you can always grab a paintbrush and bring it back. Now, as you can see, I have a really fuzzy paintbrush at the moment. I need something a little bit more solid, because I'm going to have to do some fine editing up here. It's kind of got a messy selection. Don't get me wrong, it did a lot of work for me, but I need to make some adjustments. The hardness is how fuzzy or solid the circle is. Now, since this is solid, there we go. And what I really recommend is if you leave your finger on the X key, it swaps the black and white colors. So you can do this kind of stuff. There we go. I'm going to go here and just spend a few minutes painting, switching between black and white, trying to get these edges, these extra little bits. This is me stalling for time. Okay, it's not bad. And I could spend a long time on this, getting these absolutely perfect. I don't really want to, but I'm falling into that trap. Okay, that's good enough. So now what I can do is, I'm not working on the feather file, I am working on the sub-layer of the original book file. I'm still in my Smart Object. It's got a little asterisk in the tab, which means I haven't saved it yet. So I'm going to hit Control S, and then I'm going to go back to Book. Look, it's in here, and the layer mask is applied. And if I need to make any edits, I can always go right back into the PSB file and do whatever I want. Anything. Be careful when working with layer masks. You have to choose which part of the layer that you want to be able to edit. If you're getting things like this, that means you're editing the layer, and it has the squares around it. This might make it a little bit easier to see. There we go. If you're doing this, and there we go. Now I'm editing and actually taking away from the image. I'm going to undo those. There's also this chain link icon. What that does is it actually disconnects the mask from the layer. For the most part, especially starting out, you don't want to do that. Shift click on a layer will disable it. Control click will load it as a selection, and that will be Command click on a Mac. And then Alt click will show you the black and white. Okay, I'm going to save that, and I'm going to close it. This is the original JPEG. I can tell because in the name up here, it's not a PSB, it's the JPEG. When I close this, this is the one I originally cropped. I don't really want to save this. I'd like to keep the high resolution one. This one, I need to transform it so that it becomes the letter L. Just tilt it a little bit, and I might need to stretch this up so that it looks like it's actually taking up the same dimension that the letter L normally would. Murder most foul. There we go. I like it. Okay, since this is all of the title stuff, I'm actually going to put all of this into a group by itself. That's going to be one of these little folders. Click on your top layer, shift click on your bottom layer, shift click on the folder or the new group icon, and it throws them all into a folder, and then they all become, it's sort of like grouping in Illustrator. They're all the same thing now. I'll call this title. And one of the fun little things that Photoshop has is you can add little colors to this, and it's kind of like just putting post-it notes on. It's just a little visual cue for you to know which folder is which. We're going to add another one, and I'll make it blue or green or something. Okay, so now we need to do the wing and the blood. And let's go back here. In this one, I've got the wing itself, which is this thing here, and then I've got the blood splatter on top of it, and then the drips underneath of it. So it sounds like the wing is kind of the base layer that I'm going to need. So let's start with that one. File, Open. The wing comes from here, this little guy. And what I need to do now is I'm going to crop it down so we just have the wing itself. We'll have to do some more painting here. There we go. Okay. And before I go any further, I would like to get this in as a layer in my book document. Same way as before, use the Move tool to drag it to the tab and then back down. This one, we're going to have some trouble because this one is a much lower resolution file. And I'm going to show you some stuff that we can do to really mess with the file and have some fun with it, but also technically increase the resolution. Okay, so this blue should be pretty easy to select and help us get rid of it. So what I need to do is turn this into a smart object. Okay, it's its own sublayer now. I'm going to double click on it, and back into it, and I'm going to grab my quick selection, and it's going to start grabbing all of the blue. And blue is very easy for the computer to select. If you've ever seen green screens or blue screens, it's easy for a computer to do this kind of work. Now here's the thing. When I add the layer mask, it's going to do it in reverse. There's a couple ways to get around this. The first one is that you hold down Alt, and it does a reverse layer mask. The other one is that you can add the layer mask normally the wrong way, and there is under Image Adjustments, there's an invert command, and it does a photo negative, and a black and white is just going to switch its colors. So that's all it's doing to that sub layer. I got some problems. There's some little flecks of blue left in there, so I'm going to grab my paintbrush and it's really big right now. I'm going to have to shrink it down to really small, and I have to do this. There we go. Now I can go in here like this and try and smooth this out, or I can get the computer to do a lot of it for me. Watch this. If you click in one spot with the paintbrush and then shift click in a second spot, Photoshop makes it a straight line for you. That's kind of useful. So that's kind of what I want with this. I'm going to click here. So I can click right here. I'm going to go back and forth a couple of times, see if I can get it a little straighter. And I'm holding down shift this entire time. Starting to get it. I think I actually need a slightly bigger brush. This brush also has 100% hardness set to it. And this one is one I think you should probably spend a little bit of time on. The selection that it makes is very fuzzy. It wasn't that great to begin with. So if you're using this shift technique, remember where your last point is and never try to never let it get too straight. If you go over the same edge, the lines that I end up making are several straight lines, all at slightly different angles, to try and make a rounded-ish shape. Okay. Doesn't look too bad. Okay, we go down at the bottom here. Some of this is just too organic to be done with. Straight lines. With layer masking, what I find works best is that if you err on the side of chopping off too much, it ends up creating sharper lines. So for example, if you eat into these feathers a little bit more, then that's better than leaving them with fuzzy haloed edges where you can see the outside. Let me move back just a little bit. I'm painting with white. Okay. Get this tiny little amount of blue right there. And yeah, this is the kind of stuff that professionals do, and sometimes this takes a couple of hours just to do a simple layer mask. The more you do this, the better you're going to get. But it's a really, really, really crucial skill in Photoshop. There's hardly any project that you'll be doing from here on out, once you learn about layer masks, that does not use layer masks. I've used it on things as small as the favicons for web pages, a little favorite icon in your bookmarks, all the way up to files that were several gigabytes large and ended up printing out bigger than a billboard. I do want to straighten out some of these lines. And let's shrink it down so that I can get into some of these little tiny cracks. There we go. So for example, if I just go way deep into this, no one will ever know that it's not quite the shape it's supposed to be. There we go. Alright, I think it's beautiful. Actually, no I don't. I would rather spend another half an hour going over it bit by bit, but you can do that if you would like. Now, here's some of the other things you need to notice is look at how the final product is supposed to be. We've got, excuse me, it's kind of cut off here on the side. So that means my layer here, I need to do the same. I'm going to grab the brush, I'm going to make it nice and huge here, and I'm going to just eat it away. If I ever don't like this, or I find I've taken off too much, I can always come back, which is the huge, big, great benefit of these layer masks. There's a little bit more than I thought I was going to take off. That's okay. I think I'm doing good. Yeah. Okay. Great. I'm going to save this, and let's see what it looks like in my layer. Great. Now, of course, the problem is that it's really small. I need to make it bigger. You can do that in a couple of different ways. First off, the image, the reason it's so small is that the image, once I cropped it, 779 pixels by 417. Okay, it's just a little under 800 by 400. The book is, if I measure this in pixels, this is 800 pixels across. You can see up here. So this guy is actually, it's just very, very small compared to the rest of it. Okay, so I need to make this larger. If you're just going to transform it, it's still going to end up being fuzzy, because even though everything's intact here in my layer mask, or my sublayer, my smart object, it's still got to stretch it when I get here. So there's a couple of things that I'm allowed to do. The first thing is that when you stretch this, the problem that you'll run into is that it's going to make up pixels even if it's a smart object. Blowing up images is always more complicated. So I need to step back a little bit. I need to bring this whole thing, the layer and the layer mask, into the original image so that it's not a smart object. There's really only one way to do this, and that is I'm going to have to do it the same way I did before when we opened the image. There we go. So this one, this new one I just popped in is a whole fresh copy that is actually not linked to the smart object. I pulled it out of a copy out of the smart object and put it on here. It's a little tiny one. Then I've got my smart object, which I can actually get rid of now. Okay. So, oops. It also looks like my layer mask is not quite perfect. Let me fix that before we go any further. Really, I'm trying to show you just how incredibly fluid the Photoshop environment is, that you can create a sublayer, bring it back to the top. I'm going to eventually turn this back into a smart object. There's just a million things that you're allowed to do. Okay, so now, this is not something I typically recommend, but we can do this, and we kind of have to. I'm going to take this guy and stretch him. There we go. To about the size that we want. Now, okay, I still have my layer mask is a little off kilter now. I'm just painting with black. There we go. And when I do zoom in on this, I mean, the wing has lost a little bit of quality, but it's not much. But there's some stuff that we can do to this. Now, if you haven't played with filters, you should. You can kind of go nuts with them. First off, we can take this layer and I can get rid of the color from it. Not that. Filter. Let's go with the filter gallery first. This is going to adjust the original image, and I can do all kinds of crazy stuff. Each one of these is, well, it's kind of like Instagram filters, but these were before Instagram. And I'm going to go through a few of these because we can just kind of make up whatever we want on this. Brush strokes, ink outlines, that's not too much. As I'm going through these, I'm sure you're just, if you've never seen filters before, your mind is probably popping out of your eyes right now. This is really cool stuff. These have also been around for 20 years. Some of them are absolutely crazy. And we can actually add multiple ones. I'm going to add Cracular and I'm going to create a new one. It doubles it up until I choose a different one. So artistic stuff. Yeah, I guess poster edges will be fine. So each one, I can take the poster edges and change the thickness, and they have little settings for each one. Crackler is going to have different settings, and you can see each one adjust the image just a little bit. You can even rearrange the order so it applies them in a different order. And when you're ready, you just click OK. Now the great thing about using filters is that they apply to every single pixel on the entire layer. Bringing it back, it can bring it back into focus a little bit because it does such amazing global changes to it. It is actually making up tons and tons of new pixels and altering the ones that are there. But it can get over some of the problem with blowing up your layers. Okay, the other thing I think would be useful for this would be an adjustment layer. If we use hue saturation, we can set the saturation all the way down to nothing, and then that makes it a nice black and white layer. And then I can also add a levels hue and saturation layer, and then we can increase the vibrancy of it a little bit. This is a little different than what my original image saw, but there we go. Actually, it's going to be a little bit brighter because we need to bring the blood splatter out. There we go. Okay, now that I've got all of this together, the hue saturation, which makes it black and white, the levels, and the wing layer itself, I can put those in a group. Same way I did before. I'll call that wing. And we'll make that one blue. Why not? So now you can tell just visually when you're working in one folder versus another. Okay, other things I need to bring in. File, open. I need the blood splatter. Oops. Let's do this. Oh my gosh, it's all over top of everything. And it's way too big, but I need to shrink it down. This would actually make a really good candidate for a smart object. That way when I shrink it down, it retains all of its nice quality. And if you remember, I believe this was color burn. There we go. Now I can start to mess around. We can do blood on our wings. There we go. Now this does have to be on top of the layer. Whenever you change these blending modes on a layer, it changes how it interacts with the layers under it. So just be aware of that. The next one I'm going to do is going to be the drips. And I need to close some of these other layers. No, I won't change that. Okay, now you can go in here. And again, it's way too big, but I don't want to lose all the quality. I will convert to a smart object and start to shrink this down. This is a problem. It needs to be behind the wing, so this means I need to change the layer order. I've got some kind of weird problem happening. What's actually going on is this layer, my hue and saturation layer, is affecting everything that's underneath of it. If I turn that off, my red comes back. A bunch of other weird things start happening. So what I need to do is have my hue and saturation, see it comes with a layer mask. I need it to be the shape of the wing. Oh man, does this mean I have to create it all over again? No, it does not. I already have a layer mask existing and it works right here. You can do a number of things, including duplicating it. Let me explain that one more time. You can click on a layer mask and hold down Alt or Alt Option on a Mac. You can click and drag this to any other layer that has a layer mask, and when you drop it, Would you like to replace the existing layer mask? Yes. Now my hue and saturation only affects the stuff inside here, but it is also getting the stuff above. That could be bad. In fact, I think I have a problem where my feather is gone. And I think that's part of the problem. So let me do this. This is that layer mask. I'm going to grab the paint bucket, black, and we're going to do this. So move that little line. Go away. There we are. And then if you go back, alright. I think I might be having the same problem with these other layers. So let's take this new layer mask and let's apply it to everything. Yeah. There we go. Now I've got the same layer mask on everything. It's only adjusting the stuff on the wing. And wait a minute, I didn't name some of these. This is going to be splatter, and this is going to be drip 1. Let's make this a little bit bigger. And I wanted 3 drips, so that there's a lot of blood and gore in our murder novel about killing chickens or whatever. So I'm going to use my Alt drag to pull off another copy. But what's going on is that, turn off this layer, you can see that they've got these white boxes. So one of the things I found you can usually do is, if just your white is affecting things, you can usually take the blending mode, and if you simply go through them, right, where'd darken go? I think that was the one. Yeah, darken basically makes the white inconsequential. It makes it see-through. Here we go. So this is drip 2, which is actually slightly above everything. And then when you duplicate a layer, oops, here's my drip 2 copy, the layer mode does copy with it. So there we go. That'll be drip 3. Excellent. All of this I have been doing inside my wing folder. So if you click on that folder, they should all go together. How's it doing that to my feather? I don't know. I want to do that. Let's see. The last thing that I really need to do is just put in the author's name, and to do that I'll just make a copy of my murder layer, bring it down here, and this was by the Colonel. I'm going to transform that down a little bit. Need to make sure it's nice and lined up. There we are. Okay, so the big thing is that you need to make sure that you're using layer masks. The layer masks are very fluid. You can apply them to multiple things. When you start interacting layer masks and adjustment layers and blending modes, you can create some really, really neat stuff. Good luck.